and I am so thrilled. This is Gail Perry, and I'm so thrilled to be introducing our wonderful, very brilliant, newest consultant on our team, Chuck Davis, today. Chuck, how are you?
I am great. It's a delight to be here with you, Gail. Thank you.
Well, we are breaking Chuck in right off the bat with a LinkedIn live stream, and we have a lot to talk about today. But first, let's introduce a little bit Chuck's background a little bit more to you. So, Chuck, you have had an interesting career in advancement and fundraising over the years, and you have worked around the world as well as in higher ed in the US. So where should we start talking about your background?
Boy, that's a great question. So I got out my abacus the other day and determined that it's been 30 years that I have been in the business, starting out in the nonprofit arena there in Raleigh, not far from where you are today, and having a stint abroad, as you mentioned, and most recently serving Mary Baldwin, a small private liberal arts college here in the Shenandoah Valley, as vice president. But it's been a wonderful run. I've met great people, many of whom I'm still in touch with today, which is kind of important as we think about some of the things we'll chat about today. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful career full of joy and good things.
Yeah. And so y'all, everybody, please make note that Chuck has been in the fundraising business for over 30 years, and he's smiling and he's enjoying it and he's ready for more.
Well
Either
said.
crazy or we're just happy, right?
Well said. Thank you. Yes.
So the topic we wanted to talk about today is how do you create authentic, friendly, and professional relationships with donors? Because this is a real challenge, especially for a lot of people learning how to be major gift fundraisers. So Chuck, what are your tips? I know you had 3 tips you were going to share on when you want to begin building an authentic but friendly yet professional. Like, how do you merge these 3 things together?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one I've really enjoyed reflecting on over the last several days. I think really to start, Gail, it's important to remember that as human beings, we are all created, I think, for relationships with other humans. So it's just a natural outcry and outpouring of that basic wiring that I think informs the really good work that we can do with our prospects and our donors. But as you think, I believe, about starting off those relationships in a real and authentic way, you know, in my long experience in this space, I've always looked at 3 things. One is to begin that relationship looking for a point of connectivity. So if that is going into someone's office or to their home, I always am quick to scan and to look and see about what signals that person's values. Is it a trophy, a picture, an award? What is it that we can connect with? If that person has taken the call, you know, they have some interest in your organization and understand a bit about its mission. So I think it's important to begin that relationship with some level of connectivity that you can ascertain from being there.
Yeah, you know, Chuck, when I was doing frontline fundraising, you know, it's nerve-wracking to walk into a donor's office or home. And I like to immediately get them talking about themselves.
That's right.
So that I can relax and get myself together and get organized and get comfortable in the chair and all these things. So yeah, looking for that Boy Scout award or that sailing boat or the picture of the grandchildren.
Always important. And I think, you know, that's a nice segue into the second thing I think about in this space, which is, you know, always ask questions that reflect a genuine interest in that person. Again, they know your mission a bit, they know your organization, or they wouldn't have taken the meeting. So it's important to ask some probing questions that, you know, are appropriate, but reflect what you may see or understand about that person. And then, you know, thirdly, you know, we need to be 90% eyes and ears and about 10% mouth, I think, in those first encounters. And it's really important to listen and to process and reflect that which we hear. And I think those are 3 good foundational ways to think about beginning those relationships with another human that hopefully will ultimately result in support for the organizations we represent.
Yeah. Well, I so agree. And I think that showing up as interested in the other person is so key to being friendly, but you can still be very professional when you're doing that. And I think we all get it's so like bringing up the topic of nervousness again. Some people, and sometimes I do this too, tend to talk too much when you're nervous. So no, you need to have enough self-awareness or emotional intelligence to be able to watch yourself in the room. It's a lot going on, isn't it, Chuck? A lot going on.
It is. But if you think back, Gail, over your career, and as I think back over mine, I think about some of the people with whom I'm still in touch, that I've worked with for many, many years. And, that's the real joy of the work that we're called to do. And is really a gift.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about another topic that really is on your mind and my mind. And I think a lot of major gift fundraisers, especially the young ones coming up, is how important is your personal presentation, like your clothes, your hair, all these things about you as a person, and how do you want to show up to the donor?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I think the conversation in that space, is continuing to evolve as we emerge from the pandemic. And, the days of sitting behind screens with gym shorts on and a t-shirt, those are starting to fade a bit, but it does cause us to think a little differently. And for me, Gail, I have always tried to know as much as I can about that prospect or that donor and try to show up in clothes or appearance that reflects them a bit. I wouldn't show up on a country farm and eastern North Carolina with a black suit and shiny black shoes. So it's important, I think, to always be professional, to be well groomed, to be neat, and all of those standard things. But in so much as you can, dress to reflect the people with whom you're there to engage. I think that's important, and it can immediately take a potential wall away.
And also makes you feel more at ease. I remember
Yes.
hearing about a fundraiser who went to a high-tech firm, and everybody's around in their hoodies and gym shorts, and they felt so overdressed. So it's
Yeah,
really something to think about ahead of time. Like, who
it
am I going
is.
to meet? What are they like? What is their culture like? And speaking of culture, I have a third question.
I know where it is.
And you have worked around the world. Malaysia, is that correct?
Correct. We were in Kuala Lumpur.
And what did you do in Malaysia?
So I was recruited to take a job as the director of strategic development for the International School of Kuala Lumpur. So it is the largest international school in the country, and it was in the process of merging two campuses onto one new campus. So I was hired to begin the process of a capital campaign. You wouldn't really call it that in the context of the work that you and I do with organizations here, but it was a small but large effort for them to raise money to help facilitate the move to that new campus and provide some of the extras that were outside of the budget.
So interesting. And what about, did I hear something about Scotland as well?
Yeah, so we left, and I'll back up a bit. So I had been at Elon University in Central North Carolina, down the road from you, for a decade, where I'd had the opportunity to run their largest campaign from the beginning to the end, which was fun.
100 million.
100 million. We surpassed our goal, and we're on time and did it by the books. And so it was a wonderful opportunity. Friends have always heard me say it was a great chance to do one from the twinkle in the president's eye to the balloon drop at the end. But when that was over, for many reasons, we made the decision to leave the country, and I took a job as the chief executive officer of the Robert Gordon University Foundation in Aberdeen, Scotland. So that was a really, really interesting opportunity to work in a foreign country and to build infrastructure around the development program there.
And so the question is, what tips do you have for us when raising money in different cultures, or even in the US when we have many donor populations who represent diverse cultures? What do you do?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. You'll probably make some mistakes. I know that I did. But I often think, Gail, about those about the three countries we're talking about. The United States, and if you think about the understanding of philanthropy and the Western understanding. Of course, you've got the United States up here, you've got the UK here, a close second, but coming up. And then you've got Southeast Asia, Malaysia in particular, way down at the bottom, and a completely different understanding of what philanthropy means. The tax codes in the country, for example, reflect a lack of understanding or appreciation for philanthropy in that country. So it's a burgeoning thing. But as I think back on that, and I think back of having fish and chips on the northeast of Scotland with somebody that had a Doric accent so thick you could hardly understand him, to being in a wet market in Kuala Lumpur on a plastic bench having nasi lemak with a prospect. You do learn some things, and the one thing I would say, Gail, that is important for me, people are all the same. And everybody's wired the same. They have the same hopes. They have the same dreams for their families, whether they're in Scotland, Malaysia, or in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So that's something that I learned. But beyond that, there are some nuances to dealing with various cultures. The example I always think about, and I know you know this from your travels as well, the importance of a business card in Asia.
Oh, yes.
It's very ceremonial, and Americans, yes, you tend to take it, put it in the trash, put it in your pocket. It's presented, it's honored, it is discreetly put at the table. These are things you have to be, at least I had to be taught going in, and there's plenty of other stories as well.
We have a question here. I want to, and it's for you, Chuck, and I'm gonna put my glasses on. We're in a world. This is interesting. We're in a world now where face-to-face is not always easy. And so what are your best tips for building authentic relationships when you're virtual? Great question. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that is a great question. I would say it's more difficult. I think back at my most recent time as vice president here at Mary Baldwin, and I had about a year and a half of opportunity to see people face to face before the pandemic hit. And as I hired staff that started after the pandemic had started, I noticed that the lag of time for them to begin to build those relationships that resulted in gifts, it was just a longer and more difficult. So, I think some of the same points would be appropriate in an online environment. I mean, ideas of respect and listening and all of those things are still germane and important. But I'm a little old school, and I'd say I still greatly prefer that face-to-face encounter.
But I do think showing up as friendly, the way you execute that is by asking lovely questions about the other person. And I also, one of the things that I've decided in fundraising after all my years is that the more you let them talk, the more they like you.
Very true.
I just sort of sit back and ask nice questions and let them go on, and they're going to think this is the nicest lady, right?
And you'll learn something in the process.
Well, this is terrific. Our time is up. And Chuck, this is your first experience in LinkedIn Live. And you're just so easy and so easy to talk to. And we're just thrilled to welcome you to our consulting team. Y'all, we're doing capital campaigns around the country, and Chuck is taking on a few as lead consultant. And if you're really lucky, he will be your consultant. So if you'd like to get to know us better. Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.